What's up, everybody? My name is Ryan, and this is the Kingsman Report. It's the news everyone ignores. Sorry about that. This is the news everyone ignores, and tonight I have a whole bunch of different stuff I'm going to talk about. I have tech news. I have Space Force news, as you can obviously see in the thumbnail. I'm going to talk about Space Force. I have a whole bunch of different topics. So I'm going to get situated here. This is a live call-in. If you want to call in, the number is 1408-638-0968, and then you'll enter the meeting ID. It's 534-233-4758, and I'll monitor those phone calls as well. So let me get situated here, and I will be right back. All right. Also, if you guys want to view on some other platform besides this, it's also streaming on Twitch and DLive as well, and my personal Periscope page. And for the people that subscribe, thank you, and the people that listen to the podcast, this is more or less a live podcast. I just film my podcasts and then put the audio on the podcast. I put this audio on the podcast. So the people that listen to the podcast, thank you. I am monetized over there. I'm not monetized here. But I have a whole bunch of news I'm going to get into. And I'm going to go over the headlines with you guys real quick. So U.S. senators threaten Facebook, Apple with encryption regulation. I mentioned this before in a video just short term that our Attorney General William Barr was trying to get a backdoor into WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, the encrypted messengers, and Facebook recently also has denied them that. So I'm going to go over this. Amazon Ring owners foil $400,000 Bitcoin extortion plot by removing batteries. ACLU sues Homeland Security over stingray cell phone surveillance. I'm going to talk about this because I talked a little bit about the stuff that was going on in Jersey City. Well, now the details have come out, so I'm going to talk briefly about this. This is ridiculous because I think this guy needs to be caught for this. So manhunt underway for Texas cop killer. They do have his name and stuff is out there, and they think he's headed to Louisiana. Armed suspect arrested at Air Station in Corpus Christi, Texas. It's my mom's hometown. Pentagon tests long-band ballistic missile over Pacific. Deadliest weapon after a nuclear bomb. Meet Russia's TOS-1 MLRS Buratino. Taiwan says it'll help Hong Kong if Chinese violence continues. France raises pension age to 64 in defiance of protest. U.S. sanctions Iran's largest shipping company, airline, over weapon smuggling. Taliban attack U.S. military base, kills 1, injures scores. Airstrikes in Taliban attempt to breach Bagram Air Base, or Bagram Air Base. Middle Eastern nation first to buy drone armed with machine gun, and I showed you guys this. Well, I don't know if I showed it in a video, but I posted it on the Twitter page. China has a helicopter drone that it looks like to me, if you know what an AA-12 fully automatic shotgun is. They make a civilian semi-automatic shotgun too, where you can interchange the rounds that go into. You can have explosive rounds and all types of, range explosive rounds, all types of stuff like that. Well, now they're coming out. Well, they've come out with one in China, and now it looks like Turkey's gonna buy some of those. Turkey hints it could bar U.S. from using key air bases. It's a billion-ton, 14-mile-long mysterious alien formation, and Earth is heading right into it. Get into this. It's very interesting. And then I'm going to get into of course, the Space Force stuff. And everyone thinks it's funny because our president has just talked about the Space Force. The term Space Force or Space Command has always been a part of the Air Force. That word, from where I can find it, was coined in 1996, and it was actually used in a document, and I've shared it on a video before. It was called Project Bluebeam and Agenda 21 Secrets Revealed, where I showed the documents, the classified documents, where that name comes up in a modernized Project Bluebeam paperwork that came out. So it's not new. This is old. To me, it's old. A lot of the stuff some of these guys are talking about now are like, oh, look at this. Like I said, a lot of this stuff is just old. It's coming out into the open now. So people are just openly, or the government's openly talking about it now. But a lot of this stuff is old. You can go look at what Lear says about the stuff they have hidden in the desert. I mean, there's all sorts of spacecrafts that you can't imagine, aircrafts, drones, UAVs, whatever you want to call them. They've said they've had them for years. None of this stuff is really surprising to me. Pintel Space Force Agreement as major victory. And this is the title of the video: New Space Force calling Colorado home under congressional deal. And then I'm going to read this because I think this is hilarious, and it kind of gets rid of some of the other it kind of pads all the other stuff I want to talk about. Pigeons in tiny cowboy hats. I thought this was hilarious. Are a mystery in Las Vegas. So somebody apparently is gluing tiny, like dapper-looking hats and cowboy hats on pigeons, and people were taking pictures of them. They've been spotted all over Las Vegas. I think it's hilarious. I'm going to read that just because I think it's funny. So this is the first article I'm going to get into because I talk about the infringements on our rights, how the government uses corporations to go behind our back and infringe on our Fourth Amendment rights. They do it all the time. So I'm going to read some of this tech news, and I'm going to get into the other stuff. I'm probably not going to go through the entire article, so if you want to follow any of the articles that I read here tonight, then you can go to the description, and all the links are posted in there. And today is December the 12th, 2019. It is a full moon. So, and then, a lot of people are saying there's some stuff around that too, so I'm going to go ahead and get into this. I don't follow the whole astrology stuff. So, U.S. senators grilled Apple and Facebook executives over their encryption practices on Tuesday and threatened to regulate the technology unless companies make encrypted user data accessible to law enforcement. Talk about this all the time. This is where we're headed. They'll get there eventually. At a U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, Democrats and Republicans presented a rare united front as they invoked child abuse and mass shooting cases in which encryption has blocked access to key evidence and stymied investigations. You're going to find a way to do this, or we're going to do it for you, said Senator Lindsey Graham. We're not going to live in a world where a bunch of child abusers have a safe haven to practice their craft. Period. End of discussion. So when it comes to that, yeah, I completely understand that point of view of having taps on people that want to do terrorist activities or child molesters or anyone in that case. And then people will argue, well, those people have the same amendment rights as the rest of us. Not if you're a felon. So I can see where it would be beneficial there, but if you're opening the door for that, where does it end? You can just look at everybody's stuff. Are you going to need a warrant to look at everybody's stuff? That's the type of questions I would be asking. Facebook has been wrestling with multiple governments since announcing its plan to extend end-to-end encryption across its messaging services earlier this year. Its WhatsApp messaging app is already encrypted. In October, U.S. Attorney General William Barr and law enforcement chiefs of the United Kingdom and Australia called on the world's biggest social media network not to proceed with its plan unless law enforcement officials were given backdoor access. Facebook rejected that call in a letter signed by WhatsApp head Will Cathcart and Messenger head Stan Chudnowski, which is released along with the company's written testimony. The backdoor access you are demanding for law enforcement would be a gift to criminals, hackers, and repressive regimes, they wrote. This is not something we are prepared to do. Apple weathered a legal fight over encryption in 2016 when the Federal Bureau of Investigation sought access to an iPhone owned by the slain sympathizer of Islamic State in San Bernardino, California, who had murdered county employees. If you guys don't remember that, they tried to go at Apple to try to get them, and I think they hired an outside entity to hack that cell phone to get the information off there. That stand helped bolster the company's reputation for protecting user privacy, while Facebook has been mired in a series of scandals in recent years over its handling of personal data. In their testimony, Facebook's messaging privacy chief Jay Sullivan traded barbs with Apple privacy head Eric. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that guy's last name. Neuenschwander, I guess. Each suggesting lawmakers focus their scrutiny on the other company's business. Sullivan said repeatedly that Facebook does not build devices or operating systems and suggested the company was open to, quote, on-device scanning proposals that would automatically identify matches for illegal content. We don't have forms for strangers to contact each other, and our business doesn't have us scanning material of our users to build profiles on them, he said. So I've talked about this, and there's another article that came out. I'm not going to read it, but there was an article that came out that said that this, the Ring doorbell, they want to put facial recognition software in it. That's come out. They're also letting police agencies have back doors into people who own Ring doorbells and their security camera software, all that type of crap. They're allowing police departments to have back doors into those. But I mean, anyone, if you download the Neighbors app, even if you don't have Ring, you have access to all the cameras in your neighborhood, city, state, wherever you're at. But they can pinpoint you down to a square inch. That was in another article. I've gone over and gone over and gone over. You can look at the previous videos if you want to look further into that. There's other guys that talk about this too, but this one says Amazon Ring owners foil $400,000 Bitcoin extortion plot by removing the batteries. So this has to do with two things that I usually cover. One, hackers, breaches in software, apps, vulnerabilities in these things, and also cryptocurrency. So this covers kind of two things that I usually cover. It says hackers will do anything to get their hands on Bitcoin. And Bitcoin in Texas, U.S. extortionists managed to breach home security cameras to demand cryptocurrency from an unsuspecting couple. Tanya Amador, a 28-year-old who lives in Grand Prairie just outside of Dallas, gave a video to local news which reportedly showed that her Ring security system had been hacked by cryptocurrency-hungry scammers who demanded 50 Bitcoins. That's around $400,000 rounded up. Yeah, it's doing pretty crappy right now, so I don't even know if that's accurate. She says in a quote, "I was asleep and our Ring alarm was going off like an intruder had entered our home. And then when we heard a voice coming from our camera, the voice reportedly said, 'Ring support, Ring support. We would like to notify you that your account has been terminated by a hacker.' The unscrupulous scammers then demanded a 50 Bitcoin payment and threatened Amador by saying that she will be terminated herself if she doesn't oblige. Pay this 50 Bitcoin ransom or you will get terminated yourself, they said. If this wasn't scary enough, the hackers also managed to gain control of her Ring doorbell to make it appear that they were outside of her home. She and her boyfriend didn't know what was happening at the time, so she just took the batteries out of the hijack camera. Ring has been facing a slew of privacy concerns after numerous reports that their products have been hacked by bad actors. A quick Google demonstrates this isn't an isolated issue. A recent motherboard report found that their software available specifically designed to hack Ring cameras, which sells for as little as $6. The home security company told WFAA that that the hacks were a result of a third-party data breach in which Ring account details were exposed. This was not a result of Ring security being breached or compromised, it said. In this case, the more internet-connected devices you have in your home the more likely you are to be hacked. You don't need me to tell you to regularly change your passwords. I cover this stuff all the time, and I say it all the time. I've talked about, if everybody gets a chip in their hand, how easily it would probably be to hack somebody's biometrics chip with an NFC reader from a cell phone. Same goes with your debit cards. If you have an NFC reader in your phone, you can touch the cell phone to an NFC reader on a card now, and you can take the payments. You don't necessarily need a Square reader anymore. But I say it all the time. The more we become dependent upon technology, hackers will find the flaws in it, and they will exploit you for whatever they can get their hands on. I mean, even the cameras inside your house, if they're connected to the Wi-Fi system and your Wi-Fi gets hacked, yeah, bet they'll have some, pictures that they would threaten to expose you with. So, and I don't know if people have probably heard about this. Some people may not have heard about this, but what the Stingray cell phone surveillance is. You can look up any of this stuff. You can do it from your cell phone. You can just go to YouTube and look up videos, but you can type certain codes into your cell phones and it'll tell you what tower you're pinging off of. Or if there is a vehicle parked in the neighborhood that's routing your IMEI to a vehicle where they're taking your information off your cell phone before it's pinging back. They do this stuff. So, the article says, one of our largest civil liberties groups in the U.S. is suing 2 Homeland Security agencies for failing to turn over documents it requested as part of a public records request about controversial cell phone surveillance technology. The American Civil Liberties Union filed suit against Customs and Border Protection and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, in federal court on Wednesday after the organization claimed the agencies failed to produce records relating to cell phone site simulators, or stingrays. And this is what I'm talking about. They just Google cell site simulators or stingrays. Just Google this term right here, and you're gonna find out real quick that they can park a car in a neighborhood, and they can set up simulators and stingrays, and it makes you think you're not even going to be able to tell that it's going on. Like I said, you can type it into your phone. They also give you the code to clear it, to where if you are being hacked with one of these stingray things, or someone's grabbing your information through one of these cell phone site simulators, you can actually look up the code. It'll tell you where you're routed to, and you can actually get rid of that. Just research it. It's pretty common knowledge. Says stingrays impersonate cell phone towers to trick cell phones into connecting to them, allowing its operators to collect unique identifiers from the device and determine their location. The devices are used for surveillance, but also ensnare all other devices in their range. It's believed newer, more advanced devices can interpret all the cell phone calls and text messages in range. I wouldn't put it past them. A government oversight report in 2016 said both CBP and ICE collectively spent $13 million on buying dozens of stingrays, which the agencies used to locate people for arrests and prosecution. Another thing I'm going to add to this, police departments, not all, but police departments in major cities, concerts, different things like that, they use these types of things. So for the police departments, some, not all, have this technology. If they want to get information on somebody and they can get a warrant to collect information on somebody, you better bet that they can park this anywhere in a vehicle and then they can get all your information by using a stingray. You can also Google that information. I think if they get that technology, and I mean, they're public servants, but they kind of do, some of them, not all of them, kind of do what they want, operate under a color of law. I think that you can look up to find out if your local police department has one. But like I said, some of them, not all of them, have the technology. I think it's fairly expensive. It goes on to say they were used to locate people for arrest and prosecution. It says, but little else is known about stingray technology because the cell phone snooping technology is sold exclusively to police departments and federal agencies under strict non-disclosure agreements with the device manufacturers. So they may not allow you to see it, but yeah, like I said, police departments have it. I know these groups right here have them. One I'm highlighting right there on your screen, I know for a fact they have them. The ACLU filed a Freedom of Information Act request in 2017 to learn more about the technology and how it's used, but both agencies failed to turn over any documents, it said. The Civil Liberties Organization said there's no evidence to suggest that records exist, but has, quote, exhausted all administrative remedies to obtain the documents. Now it wants the courts to compel the agencies to turn over records, not only to shine light on the government's use of powerful surveillance technology in the immigration context, but also to assess whether its use of this technology complies with constitutional and legal requirements and is subject to appropriate oversight and control, the filing said. Well, if they have disclosure agreements, then they're not going to disclose that information, and they'll use it probably if they see fit. As they see fit, they're going to use it. The group wants the agency's training materials and guidance documents and records to show where and when stingrays were deployed across the United States. TBD spokesperson Nathan Peters said the agency does not comment on pending litigation as a matter of policy. But it says a spokesperson for ICE did not comment also. The reality is they use these. This is old technology. They don't allow civilians to have things like cell phone jammers. You can't have a cell phone jammer. These are very expensive from videos that I've watched on it. This stingray technology in particular is very expensive. That's why it's not easily attained by some police departments. They just don't have the budgets for them. But, you know, they can ping your cell phone. They can still. So, this article says, Jersey City suspects targeted kosher store where 3 died, officials say. So we all kind of know the story, where we're up to now. I'm just going to say, you know, continue to pray for these people, but as it's come out, they're saying that these people that were involved in this were, and you know, they got to use this terminology, Black Hebrew Israelites. And it's right here. So it wasn't anything like, you know, we first expected. You know, some of the stuff that was coming out when people started breaking this, other people that live stream news started breaking this. Apparently, you know, he had beefs with Jews and pretty much did what he did. So continue to pray for them and you know, the police departments that were involved in this. This says manhunt underway for Texas cop killer after officer struck at traffic stop. Like I said at the beginning of this, the most recent article for this, they believe that he's headed towards Louisiana. But it says a manhunt intensifies for the suspect and a deadly hit and run during a traffic stop in Nassau Bay, Texas. Police in Texas are on a manhunt Wednesday for a suspect who struck and killed an officer with his vehicle while fleeing a traffic stop Tuesday night. The man who police say is likely has one handcuff attached to his wrist is accused of driving into 43-year-old Nassau Bay Sergeant Kayla Sullivan outside an apartment complex in the Houston area. His vehicle was later discovered abandoned, and Sullivan, a 15-year veteran of the department, died at the hospital. He was a police officer at heart. She came to work every day. She enjoyed the job, Chief Tim Cromie said. Her blood ran blue. She was a police officer. She was a police officer's officer. So pray for this this police officer that was involved in this. So, armed suspect arrested at Naval Air Station at Corpus Christi. Like I said, my mother is from Corpus. I've been down there. It's a beautiful place. But, you know, we've had what happened at in Florida and what happened in, you know, Pearl Harbor. All this stuff. I hate to say this, but we're gonna see this happen, because not only are they doing it here, I showed you articles I'm gonna read later on in the stream about them doing this stuff overseas at our bases. So, armed suspect arrested at Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi, Texas. An armed suspect at Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi, Texas, was arrested Wednesday morning. So it says this is not a drill. Shelter in place. Base on lockdown, said Facebook post on Naval Air Station, Corpus Christi, before 8 a.m. local time. A short time later, an updated post said a suspect had been taken into custody. An official at the base said an armed suspect was reported to be near an Army depot building on the base, and the lockdown was lifted less than an hour after it was announced. No shots were fired and no injuries were reported, according to the Navy. Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi, was also placed on lockdown due to the incident, but a tweet from the school said the situation posed no risk to the campus. The lockdown and arrest come after 2 recent shootings at Navy bases. Then it's going to go into that, you know, happened in Pensacola, Florida. And the one in Pearl Harbor. I don't really like to... personally, I cover this stuff so people are aware, but, you know, I say all the time that this stuff is going to become more frequent. I hate to say it. It's like they're testing it. So this came out today. Pentagon tests long-band ballistic missile over Pacific. Says the Pentagon on Thursday flight tested a missile that had been banned under a treaty that the United States and Russia abandoned last summer. Some U.S. arms control advocates say the test risked an unnecessary arms race with Moscow. The prototype missile was configured to be armed with a non-nuclear warhead. Pentagon declined to disclose specifics beyond saying the missile was launched from, quote, static launch stand at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California and landed in an open ocean. The Defense Department said the ballistic missile flew more than 500 miles. The test comes amid growing uncertainty about the future arms control and the last remaining treaty limitation on U.S. and Russia's nuclear weapons. The New START Treaty of 2010 is scheduled to expire in February of 2021. That treaty can be extended for as long as 5 years without requiring a renegotiation of its main terms. The Trump administration has indicated little interest in doing so. The Pentagon declined to reveal the maximum range of the missile tested. Last spring, when the U.S. officials disclosed the testing plan, they said it would be roughly 3,000 kilometers to 4,000 kilometers. That is sufficient to reach a potential target in parts of China from a base on Guam, for example. The Pentagon has made no basing decisions and has suggested that it will take at least a few years before such missiles would be ready for deployment. There's a picture there. I don't know if that's an actual picture of it. That under the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, land-based cruise and ballistic missiles with a range between 500 kilometers and 5,500 kilometers were prohibited. The Trump administration chose to abandon the INF treaty, saying that while it had adhered to the treaty's limitations, Russia had violated it by deploying a non-compliant cruise missile aimed at U.S. allies in Europe. Shortly after exiting the treaty in August, the Pentagon flight tested an INF-range cruise missile. It says a request for comment from the Russia embassy in Washington on Thursday's test was not immediately answered Thursday. In a brief appearance before reporters after the test announcement, Defense Secretary Mark Esper was asked whether the Pentagon is considering deploying an INF-range missile to Europe. Once we deployed intermediate-range missiles, and if my commanders require them, then we will work closely and consult closely with our allies in Europe, Asia, and elsewhere with regards to any possible deployments, Esper said. Daryl Kimball, executive director of the Arms Control Association, said the Pentagon's missile project is a mistake. This is a reckless and unnecessary escalation that is going to exacerbate tensions with Russia, China, and North Korea, all of whom would be in range of this type of missile if it is ever deployed. The other problem for the Defense Department is that there is no NATO or East Asia ally that has yet said they are interested in hosting such a missile, because it would put them on the Russian, Chinese, or North Korean target list. We'll see what happens. Because with all the staging that's going on, I read a couple days ago, they're staging a bunch of stuff over in Europe. It was one of the biggest installments they've had over there in 25 years. Something's going on. Something's going on that they're not telling us they're preparing for. Whether it be an asteroid, whatever's coming. I don't know, because all these news articles that I read are just ominous about nuclear this and nuclear that, and it's just gotten to the point that's all you read. It's either space or military stuff that's going on. Deadliest weapon after a nuclear bomb, meet Russia's TOS-1 MLRS Baratino. So it says the TOS-1 Baratino is a unique Russian self-propelled multiple rocket launcher system, or MRLS, that has seen action in global hotspots like Afghanistan, Chechnya, Iraq, and Syria. Like the enormous 240mm 2S4 self-propelled mortar, the TOS-1's specialty is obliterating heavily fortified positions. Although some of these may be found in rural rebel strongholds and fortified caves, they might often be employed in heavily urbanized environments. It's gained a uniquely nasty reputation because of its horrifying effect it has on its fuel-air explosive warheads. To put it concisely, these are amongst the most devastating explosive weapons short of tactical nuclear weapons. So it says fuel-air explosives. TOS stands for heavy flamethrower, which is only accurate in literal sense. Instead of projecting a stream of jellied gasoline, the TOS-1 launches a rocket carrying a fuel-air explosive, or FAE. These were first employed by the United States in Vietnam War because napalm wasn't destructive enough. It says napalm munitions dispersed a sticky, flaming liquid over a wide area. By contrast, a fuel-air explosive detonates the very air itself. A small explosive inside the FAE munition spreads a chemical cloud in the air through an aerosol effect. The gaseous cloud seeps effortlessly into buildings and caves and down into slit trenches. A secondary explosive then ignites the cloud, causing a massive and long-lasting explosion. Wowzers. While the heat generated by FAEs caused lethal burns in wide radius, it says roughly 200 by 300 meters, the overpressure created by a sudden combustion of the air is even deadlier. The fiery blasts create a partial oxygen vacuum that kills and maims in a variety of grotesque ways and cannot be mitigated with body armor or hand cover. The pressure generated by a TOS-1 blast amounts to 427 pounds per square inch. For comparison, most conventional bomb blasts create roughly half that amount, and regular air pressure is 14 pounds per square inch. Victims near the center of a TOS-1 blast radius are crushed to death. Further out, the pressure can break bones, dislocate eyes, cause internal hemorrhaging, and rupture eardrums, bowels, and other internal organs. It also sucks the air out of victims' lungs, possibly causing them to collapse, leading to death by suffocation. The United States was the first to use fuel-air explosives in the Vietnam War, dropping them by air to clear helicopter landing zones and minefields, and later deploying them as offensive weapons. In 2002, attempting to hunt down Osama bin Laden in the rugged mountains of Tora Bora, U.S. aircraft deployed thermobaric warheads on precision-guided missiles. The warheads would suck the oxygen out of the caves and Taliban fighters were hiding in. The Soviet Union adopted the weapons shortly after the United States did, using them in a border scrimmage against the Chinese in 1969, and employing both air-dropped and ground-launched FAEs on a large scale in the War of Chechnya. The proliferation of TOS systems through global conflict ensures they will continue to see use in combat. So if you want to read more into this article, the link is in the description below. But that sounds awful. Hang on. This article says Taiwan says it'll help Hong Kong if Chinese violence continues. And I've read in previous articles that about, well, I guess the last video about what would happen if a war broke out between Taiwan and China, and you can go back and look in that video if you want to. And then just so happens the day after this happens, day after I read that article, this happens. This article is published. Taiwan's top diplomat said Tuesday that his government stands with Hong Kong citizens pushing for freedom and democracy and would help those displaced from semi-autonomous Chinese city of Beijing intervenes with greater force to quell the protest. Speaking to the Associated Press in capital Taipei, Foreign Minister Joseph Wu was careful to say his government has no desire to intervene in Hong Kong's internal affairs, and that existing legislation is sufficient to deal with a relatively small number of Hong Kong students or others seeking to reside in Taiwan. But he added that Hong Kong police have already responded with disproportionate force to the protest. He said any intervention by mainland Chinese forces would be, quote, a new level of violence that would prompt Taiwan to take a different stance in helping those seeking to leave Hong Kong. When that happens, Taiwan is going to work with the international community to provide necessary assistance to those who are displaced by the violence there, he said. Chinese parliamentary forces have deployed to the Chinese city of Shenzhen, just outside Hong Kong, since the protests began in June. Neither they nor the thousands of Chinese military troops garrisoned in Hong Kong itself have been deployed to confront the protesters so far. The people here understand that how the Chinese government treats Hong Kong is going to be the future way of them treating Taiwan. And what turned out in Hong Kong is not very appealing to the Taiwanese people, Wu said. China's Communist Party insists that Taiwan is part of China and must be reunited with it, even if by force. Modern Taiwan was funded when Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists who once ruled on the mainland were forced to retreat to the island in 1949 after the communists took power in the Chinese Civil War. Beijing has suggested that Taiwan would be reunited under the one country, two systems model that applied to Hong Kong after the former British colony was returned to China in 1997. That agreement allowed Hong Kong to keep its civil liberties, independent courts, and capitalist system, though many Hong Kong accused Beijing of undermining those freedoms under President Xi Jinping. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen has said that the, quote, one country, two systems model has failed in Hong Kong and brought the city to the brink of disorder. Government surveys earlier this year showed about 80% of Taiwanese citizens oppose reunification with China. This Wu spoke a month before Taiwanese voters go to the polls for presidential and parliamentary elections on January the 11th. Opinion survey suggests that Tsai, and U.S. and British educated law scholar who rejects Beijing's claims to Taiwan, is on track to secure a second term over her more China-friendly rival, Han Kuo-yu of the Nationalist Party. China served links with Taiwan's government after Tsai took office in 2016 because her refusal to accept Beijing's claims on the island. It has since been increasing diplomatic, economic, and military pressure on Taiwan. I'm going to keep covering this just because these articles are just popping up more and more often. The whole Hong Kong, China, and Taiwan. They're popping up more so in the news that I read. So people in France listen to this podcast probably more. It's France, and then of course people in this country. So we're probably going to see, a lot more protests come out of France because this is one of the reasons they're already rioting over there. A lot of this stuff will come to fruition here in the future. France raises pension age to 64 in defiance of protest. So French workers will begin contributing to a new public pension system from 2025 under President Emmanuel Macron's plan to update the country's complex and generous existing arrangements. After days of strikes disrupting life across the country, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe promised minimum full benefits of 1,000 euros or $1,100 American a month, and said that the age for receiving a full pension will rise to 64 from 62 in 2027, later than some commentators had predicted. He said the legislation will go to the lawmakers in February, and he aims to have the bill passed by the end of next year. French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe unveils the details of pension reform plan in Paris. So it says, I hear the concerns expressed over recent days, and I understand them, Philippe said as he set out the plan at the event in Paris. We may disagree on some points, but the ambition is for a universal system with social justice. There is no hidden agenda. Labor unions have vowed to extend and intensify their protest, and strikes started last Thursday. The moderate CFDT union said the government has crossed the red line by choosing a one-size-fits-all system and to make 64 the new age for a full pension for budgetary reasons. It says, while the government has been making consolatory noises in a bid to avoid a total blockade of transport, schools, and other public services, pushing through the central election pledge is an important political test for 41-year-old Macron. It says the reform aims to ensure pension payments don't place a burden on the state budget, and that all contributors will have the same entitlements, ending the special regimes that let some workers retire in their early 50s. Some economists and many low-paid workers have challenged the president's assertion that the new plan will mean equal rights for everyone, while unions have planned further demonstrations for December the 12th and December 17th. The main details of the plan are right here. One pension system instead of 42 currently. Benefits indexed to wages, not inflation. New regime applies to everyone born from the start of 1975. And then it goes to a whole list here. If you guys want to look more into that, if you listen to the podcast, all the links are in the description of the podcast and in the video. So this article is titled U.S. Sanctions Iran's Largest Shipping Company, Airline, Over Weapons Smuggling. It's funny there. It says the sanctions keep on coming. Just going to cause more riots with the people there. The U.S. Treasury Department Office of Foreign Assets Control on Wednesday announced sanctions on Iran's largest shipping company and airline in an attempt to stop the development of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, the Financial Times reports. The shipping company, the Islamic Republic of Iran Shipping Lines, has been accused of smuggling weapons into Yemen on behalf of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or OFAC, said the U.S. seized weapons on a small boat last month believed to be on their way to Houthi rebels. OFAC also said Manhunt Air has aided the IRGC and has also moved weapons and personnel for Hezbollah and the Assad regime in Syria. There's a quote here. It says from Steve Herman. It says the Iranian regime uses its aviation and shipping industries to supply its regional terrorist and militant groups with weapons, directly contributing to the devastating humanitarian crisis in Syria and Yemen. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the U.S. will continue a maximum pressure campaign of sanctions against Iran. This is going to cause, this will definitely cause more, I guess, situations with people riding over there. So, this article is titled, Taliban Attack on U.S. Military Base Kills 1, Injures Scores. Suicide bomber struck the main U.S. military base in Afghanistan on Wednesday, killing at least one person and injuring scores in a major attack that could scupper plans to revive peace talks between the United States and the Taliban. Because, last time they were going to have peace talks, I think they killed a bunch of people, including a U.S. soldier. Or it's probably, and I'm, just speculating here, it's somebody doing it, blaming it on them so that we don't have peace talks with them. It could be either or. When it comes to this stuff, it's up in the air with me. Taliban claimed responsibility for the attack, which struck the Bagram Air Base Air Base north of Kabul. It said first, a heavy-duty Mazda vehicle struck the wall of the American base, and said later several mujahideen equipped with light and heavy weapons were able to attack the American occupiers. Taliban spokesman claimed the attack was still ongoing, and the U.S.-led military coalition said the attack was quickly contained and repelled. 5 servicemen from the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, which is part of the U.S.-led coalition, were among those injured, the country's defense ministry said in a statement. So you can go more into this article, but I was bringing that up because this. They called in airstrikes because of that. So a series of airstrikes were called in following a failed attempt by the Taliban to breach the airbase on Wednesday. And U.S. and Afghan forces were pulled into a 9 to 10 hour firefight after a suicide bombing targeted a medical facility that was under construction near a base. And you can go more into this article, but it basically talks about, Trump visited this. It was the same Air Force that Trump visited on Thanksgiving, same Air Force base over there. But because of that, then we struck back with that stuff. So this article I think is crazy because the only time I ever heard of the armed, with the actual, firearm, machine gun or whatever, was the Chinese helicopter drone. That looks absolutely crazy. If you go to the Twitter page, I think it's on Twitter or the Instagram page, I posted on there as well. But now Turkey is wanting to buy drones with machine guns. Pretty soon it'll be laser beams and everything else, and I'm sure they probably have all that stuff already. Like I said, they don't tell us about it until after the fact. Middle Eastern nation first to buy drone armed with machine gun. Said before the end of next year, Turkey will become the first nation to get its hands on a brand new military drone equipped with a machine gun. It's called a Sangar, and it can carry 200 rounds of ammunition. New Science story notes that the drone is accurate enough to hit a human target with every bullet fired from 200 meters at 665 feet away, a devastating level of accuracy in the already troubling space of drone warfare. Imagine if they have a fleet of these going up against a battalion or whoever. You're talking about mowing people down with that great accuracy. So the Sungar is a work of Turkish electronics firm Asisguard. And according to the company's website, a human can control a drone from a distance of 10 kilometers. Using a single controller, they can operate up to 3 Sungars, so they can do 3 of them at a time. During the day or night, looking through the device's camera and deciding when to fire their guns. Asisguard equipped the drone with 2 systems designed to address the issue of recoil affecting accuracy, and one uses a group of sensors that account for variables ranging from a target's distance to the current wind speed. The other uses robotic arms to manually move the gun as needed to counteract the recoil. Sungar isn't the first machine gun equipped to a drone we've seen. It's easy to see why these devices appeal to militaries. With an armed drone, a soldier can attack the enemy while staying out of harm's way. But as more and more armed drones emerge, it seems like there is a matter of time before militaries decide to remove human operators from the equation altogether. In fact, that might already be happening, as United States Defense Secretary Mark Esper accused China in November of selling autonomous killer drones to nations in the Middle East. And I've showed you guys that drone. Like I said, it's on my social. I posted on there. It looks insane. So while the drones that Asisguard plans to sell to Turkey later this month might require a human operator, there's a chance the next armed drones the nation adds to its arsenal will be autonomous, and that'll be when things get really scary. Go look up I could pull it up, but I'll really start to glitch if I pull it up here. But yeah, you can go look at the Chinese helicopter drone. It's absolutely insane. There was a picture on this, but I don't think they have the actual picture of the drone. Here's another one on Turkey. Turkey hints it could bar U.S. from using key air bases. This Turkey foreign minister suggested Wednesday that the United States could be barred from using 2 strategic air bases in retaliation to possible U.S. sanctions against his country, the state-run Amdullah agency reported. Mevlut Cavusoglu, I guess. I butcher these names, I'm sorry. Comments came amid reports that U.S. lawmakers had agreed on a defense bill that also includes calls to sanction Turkey over the decision to proceed with the purchase and deployment of Russia's S-400 missile defense system. I read an article in a previous video that they were going to test the S-400 missile defense system. We said don't do it, and they did it anyways. And now I read an article in the prior video, the one that has to do with the cyborg super soldiers. I believe it's that one. That they're deploying the S-400 missile defense system. Russia's actually deploying the S-4 missile defense system down in the Arctic, and they're going to use it kind of like the Iron Dome system is used in Israel to shoot down any incoming fire. Seen a lot of this S-400 pop up in a bunch of articles. This is in the event of a decision to sanction Turkey, then Incirlik and Karakik air bases can be brought to the agenda. Anadolu quoted this fella here as saying, he said Congress members must understand that it is not possible to get anywhere without sanctions. Says the air base, Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey, has been the main base for U.S. operations in the Middle East, and more recently in a fight against the Islamic State group in Syria and Iraq, while Karakik in eastern Turkey is a key NATO base. Turkey's decision to proceed with the purchase of the Russian system has added to growing tensions between the 2 NATO allies. I believe they bought most of them in 2015, 2016, and they, like I said, recently tested them after we warned them not to. I told you he was going to test them anyways. He tested them anyways. I don't know why he wouldn't. And of course, Russia's using them, like I said. It says Turkey's decision to proceed with the purchase of the Russian system has added to growing tensions between the two NATO allies. Washington says the Russian system poses a threat to NATO and has removed Turkey from the U.S.-led F-35 stealth fighter jet program. Tensions were raised further after Turkey launched an excursion into northeastern Syria to drive away Syrian Kurdish forces that had partnered with the U.S. in a fight against the Islamic State group. Turkey considers the Kurdish fighters as terrorists because of their links to outlawed Kurdish rebels fighting inside Turkey. Will he get more sanctions? Probably yes. Will Erdogan go to Xi Jinping for more money? Probably so. A lot of guys ain't even covering that part, and I don't get it. This is very interesting. Now we're going to start getting into like the Space Force stuff. So this says it's a billion-ton, 14-mile-long mysterious alien formation, and Earth is heading right into it. This is an asteroid 3200 Pigeons thick trail debris, which is a source of the annual Geminids meteor shower here on Earth, has a mass of about 14 billion tons and is 60,000 miles wide and is more than 14 million miles long. Maybe where some of these rocks that are falling all over the Earth are coming from. Maybe it's coming from the tail of this thing. Or maybe it's just hitting a bunch of crap and it's knocking it into our atmosphere. Scientists at America's Naval Research Laboratory built a specialized camera known as the Wide Field Imager for Solar Probe, or WHISPER, to study the solar wind and how space weather can disrupt GPS satellite and energy grids. The instrument attached on top of NASA's Parkes Solar Probe has revealed the elusive trail of dust left over the space rock is unprecedented detail. 3200 Python has a wildly eccentric orbit that brings it closer to the Sun than Mercury, and flings it back out further than Mars. Astronomers had detected the spray of debris emitted from the asteroid before. As the asteroid whips around, the dirt is compressed into a tail. Although the streak stretches long and wide and collectively contains more than 1 billion tons of dirt, it's difficult for telescopes to find. Though when our home world passes through the debris, the material shows up on a Geminids meteor shower to us Earthlings. The trail as a whole is best observed near the Sun. It's believed that solar radiation pressure causes bits to break away from the asteroid, so when it's close to our star, more stuff is possibly knocked off the cosmic rock. But our star's glare downs out its presence, making it hard for telescopes to see it. December 14th, you can catch the meteor shower. It says it's the best time. The best time to catch the Geminids meteor shower is December 14th, so in 2 days, right after we have this full moon, on the 12th of December, in the 12th month. And I think 12th hour, some crazy, something has to do with 12, 12, 12, 12, 12. This is why NRL's heliospheric imagers are so groundbreaking. Carl Batmans, of computational scientist at NRL Space Scientist Division, said on Wednesday, they allow you to see near-sun outflows massively fainter than the sun itself, which would otherwise blind our cameras. And in this case, you can also see solar systems objects extremely close to the sun, which most telescopes cannot do. WHISPER captured enough data to allow researchers to estimate the size of the mass of 3200 Python's dust trail. The sheer amount has led them to question the nature of the asteroid itself. There's no way the asteroid is anywhere near active enough when it's near the sun to produce the massive dust we are seeing. Goes on to say there must be something else other than solar radiation pressure that is making the space rock emit so much debris seen in the Gemini's meteor shower, though the eggheads aren't quite sure what exactly. Something catastrophic must have happened to Pythons a couple of thousand years ago and created the Geminid meteor shower, he added. WHISPER takes snapshots in the visible light spectrum of the solar corona and solar outflow using two overlapping cameras. And NASA's Parkes Solar Probe was launched in 2018. Expect to continue orbiting our star, approaching as close as 4.3 million miles from its center for another 5 years or so. If you want to read up more on that article, feel free. Links are in the description. So this is crazy. I'm not gonna play the videos. One of them's like an hour long, but the links are in the description. If you're interested in watching the videos, you guys can go there and watch the videos for yourself. But this is pretty interesting. So now I'm gonna start getting into, you know, the Space Force stuff that's going on and the stuff that's titled under the video. It says recently retired U.S. Air Force general makes eyebrow-raising claims about advanced space technology. It says retired Lieutenant General Stephen L. Quast says fantastic technology exists that could transport a human anywhere on Earth within an hour. Now we're getting into teleportation. I'm telling you, if they say they have this stuff, they've had this stuff. They've ran tests on this stuff a long time ago. You can look up articles about that. Recently retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Stephen L. Quast gave a lecture last month that seems to further signal that the next major battlefield will be in outer space. Is why all this talk about space is coming out, is for that reason. And, you know, people will say this is a conspiracy also. But you can read articles, declassified articles, about the stuff they have stationed in the atmosphere. The tungsten rod, for instance. I mean, you can look at a lot of the stuff they have. So I'm saying, when I see this stuff, like, well, okay, so the article, what he talks about transporting humans, that's new. I have never heard anyone say that in particular, but I've read old articles where they tested that technology, and they found sailors and stuff that were disoriented after the test. I've read that type of stuff, but as far as the Space Force goes, or Space Command goes, it's old. And people act like this is like the newest thing out there. It's old. You can look it up. There's declassified documents on it. They've coined the name Space Command and Space Force and Project Bluebeam. Declassified paperwork. You can look the name up. It's not new. They may be getting more advanced at it, but as far as new goes, not new. It says while military leadership rattling the space sabers is nothing new, Quast's lecture included comments that heavily hint at the possibility that the United States military and its industry partners may have already developed next-generation technologies that have the potential to drastically change the aerospace field and human civilization forever. In this mere posturing, or could we actually be on the verge of making science fiction a reality? So, some articles there. This goes into who he is. I don't know why. Oh. You know, it gives all his credentials here. There's a picture of him there. And you can watch, you know, this video. It says, which this video here is very interesting. Think here. I'll play this, but I'll have to cover it. So I can play the audio, but I have to cover it so I don't get a copyright strike.
Is it time to revisit the physical standards? And Training Command is investing in assessments. Because when you have the granular knowledge of talent, then you can start making some decisions on risk and reward. We need two things. One, we need a measurement of talent so that I'm not blindly making it. And two, we need the nuanced granularity of our human capital and talent management so that we can make a decision, an informed decision on whether we want to take risk on that talent. We need both. And that's what we're working for. Okay? And we're going to be there faster than people think. Because of the nature of the digital age, how quickly you can use big data to see this. And we're designing it with the right people in mind. So in the future, the vision is this, and this puts a finer edge on this conversation. When somebody in civil society says, I want to be a pilot in the Air Force, that's not good enough. Okay? It's not good enough to be an average pilot if you're only going to be. I want excellence. I want our third core value, excellence. Okay? So I have assessments that is informed by data of real pilots that are world class, better than anybody else in the world. And I know what behaviors and what habits of mind make them successful because I can see the data. I'm using that data to fold back into recruiting to say, okay, you want to be a pilot? Prove that you're good enough to join my Air Force. And I can see the data in the way you play these games online and in the way you do what I'm asking you to do. And I can see if you're a cheater. I can see if you cut corners. I can see if you're good at the geospatial. I can see if you're good at taking smart risk. I can see if you're good at collaborating with others in that environment to be a good teammate in the air. I can see all of these things. And now I can say, you know what? You want to be a pilot in the Air Force, but I only need 3,000 pilots this year. And I'm looking at 200,000 people in the data of our civil society. And you sit 4,345 in the rack and stack of talent. So no, but you know what? I see that you would make a world-class firefighter. Come be a firefighter, or come be a maintainer, or come be a data analyst, because you are showing talent in that area. You may want to be a pilot, but that's not your natural gifts. These are your natural gifts. What do you think?
Oh, okay, so that's just one of those 2-minute videos that he has out there, but it says, despite the controversy surrounding his removal from his post at AETC, some defense analysts and Lieutenant Gen Quast's own supporters within the armed forces were suggesting prior to his retirement that he should be appointed as commander of the Pentagon's budding Space Force. Quast was published several op-eds in recent years pushing for U.S. military to take on a greater role in space and in order to ensure American economic dominance and what he sees as the continued proliferation of American values. The article goes on and says, gaining the high ground in space. Quast delivered a lecture at Hillsdale College in Washington, D.C. on November 20, 2019, titled The Urgent Need for a U.S. Space Force. Quast's wide-ranging speech described the power of new technologies to revolutionize humankind, referencing the competitive advantage the discovery of fire offered to early humans and the strategic value that nuclear weapons offer 20th century superpowers. When it comes to current revolutionary technologies, Quast says the power of space will change world power forever, and that it's up to the United States military to leverage that power. The quote here says, as a historian reflecting on the fact that throughout the history of mankind, technology has always changed world power, but the story of rejecting the new and holding and clinging to the paradigms of the past is why no civilization has ever lasted forever, and values are trumped by other values when other civilizations figures out a way to find a competitive advantage. The nature of power, you either have it and your values rule, or you don't, or you do not have it and you must submit. We see that play out again and again in history, and it's playing out now. There's that video if you guys want to watch that. As it's been a common as of late, Lieutenant Gen Quast cites rapidly growing Chinese military and technological advances as the reason why the United States must invest heavily in new space-based technologies. And as I said and read in other articles, Russia believes that NATO and the U.S. is militarizing space. And then there's an article I read that it says that Russia's most dominant in space. If you have two opposed people coming out and saying this against one another, do they know that they have other things in space or the atmosphere that we don't know about, and vice versa? I mean, we don't. That's what I'm saying. There's so many mixed articles coming out. Who's to say what we have and what we don't have? The Air Force, although, they talk that we need to have this booming space command. They're all linked together. NASA, Air Force, Space Command is the Air Force. It's been the Air Force. like I said, you can just Google it. Look up. Go in the old Project Bluebeam files. You'll find the paperwork where it talks about the Space Force and the Space Command. It's not necessarily new. It's like I'm saying, the advances in technology becoming more prolific now than ever. Then that's what's, you know, we want to boast and brag to our enemy that we have this capability, you know, to pretty much feed off the fear, or to put fear into them that we have that capability. But as technology advances, you know, people buy weapons from Israel. They buy technologies from Israel. They buy technologies from China. They buy technologies from us. We're all in this kind of together, and then we use it against each other. And how that works out. It says we can say today we are dominant in space, but the trend lines are what you have to look at, and they will pass. They'll pass us in the next few years if we don't do something. They will win this race, and then they will put roadblocks up in space, Quast argues. Because once you get the high ground, the strategic high ground, it's curtains for anybody trying to get to that high ground behind them. Quast claims China is already building a navy in space, complete with the space-based equivalents of battleships and destroyers. That is actually old news, and you can go look that up. Which are able to maneuver and kill and communicate with dominance, and we, the United States, are not. Quast's speech centers on the thesis that the United States needs a space force in order to counter Chinese advances and win the competition over the economy of the future, and as an extension, who sets the values of the future. Space is the Navy for the 21st century economy, a network of economy that would dominate any linear terrestrial economy in the four engines of growth and dominance that change world power, transportation, information, energy, and manufacturing. Whoever gets to the new market sets the values for that market, and we could either have the market with the values of our Constitution, or we could have the values we see manifest in China. So it says, as we reported previously, there have been hints of radical new technologies under development by the military, and just as in Quast's speech, Chinese advances have been cited as the reason why these technologies are needed. China has been rapidly expanding its presence in space in recent years, placing a ladder on the far side of the moon. I read that article in the late 2018, and what some say was a push to scout natural resources with which to develop a permanent lunar manufacturing center. China has also been developing, quote, mothership aircraft from which to rapidly and unpredictably launch space planes and other payloads into space. The country has also launched several eyebrow-raising satellites in recent years, which some analysts claim could be used in anti-satellite warfare, basically bring down communications. Beyond all this, they have been investing heavily in traditional space programs that includes many facets of manned and unmanned space technologies that rivals and in some ways exceeds our own. So setting the stage for the 21st century warfare, says Quast argues that the scientists, engineers, historians, and strategists of today have been pushing the U.S. Congress to more heavily and more rapidly fund the Space Force and associated technologies, but there is still some pushback and confusion as to why these are presently needed. Quast ultimately makes the case that the United States must be able to bring kinetic power, non-kinetic power, and informational power to the battlefield cheaper and faster than its adversaries in order to ensure strategic advantage in space. So, you can read more into this, but I mean, he talks about some of the technologies. Better off at looking at the videos that he gives a speech on and talks about the stuff. So this article is Pence hails Space Force Agreement as major victory. House and Senate negotiations unveiled a compromise version of the National Defense Authorization Act late Monday. So the article I just read, the general might get what, he's been wanting the whole time. Vice President Mike Pence on Tuesday celebrated congressional action to create the U.S. Space Force in its annual defense policy bill, crediting President Donald Trump with major victory in advancing American dominance in space. Once the administration after another have observed the lack of coherent and unified command, and President Trump's direction from early on was to establish a Space Force to bring together all those desperate interests, Pence told Politico in a phone interview. House and Senate negotiations unveiled a compromise version of the National Defense Authorization Act late Monday that will establish the U.S. Space Force within the Air Force. It's already been a part of that. The way I look at it, it's been a part of that. Like I said, 1996, the Air Force had the same, they were using the same name, Space Force, Space Command, whatever you want to call it. It's actually Space Command, it's not really Space Force. They unfurled the flag for it and everything. But because we're seeing all this, people trying to create a dominance in space, then we're going to see our country actually come out and talk about something that they have, but they're going to make it public so that they get more funding, is what I think that they're doing. The article goes on to say, while both the House and Senate proposed creating a new space service, they clashed over how best to structure it. The different approaches proved to be one of the most contentious debates in the months-long negotiation over the bill. The final bill, which now will be voted on by both chambers, would redesignate the Air Force Space Command as the U.S. Space Force, and would also give the Air Force Secretary the authority to transfer space personnel in the military into the new service, though it would not allow for hiring new people. Similar to how the Marine Corps is a separate branch under the authority of the Secretary of the Navy, the legislation would also create the Chief of Space Force Operations, who would sit on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as an Assistant Secretary for the Air Force for Space Acquisition and Integration. In June 2018, Trump called for a standalone branch on par with the Army and the Navy, but Pence said Congress' plan nonetheless follows the president's intent to prioritize space within the Pentagon and unite all the different space missions spread across the military. Prior to the president's vision for establishing a space force, we basically had space assessed in 60 different departments, Pence said. He later added the Space Policy Directive Trump signed called for the establishment of a sixth branch of the armed forces. What Congress had to agree to would do exactly that. Still, Pence said it is possible the Space Force could grow into a standalone department on par with the Army and the Navy as the military space mission grows, just as the Air Force was split off from the Army in 1947. But the establishment of the new service is not guaranteed, and despite initial buy-in from authorizers, the compromise bill would need to pass both the House and the Senate, and then it will be up to the appropriators whether to fund the new branch. The House Appropriations Committee in May denied funding for the Space Force, instead asking the Pentagon to study alternative options. They've had it. They've had, that's what I'm saying. To me, I was reading stuff about this a long time ago. This says new Space Force calling Colorado home under congressional deal. In what seemed as a major accomplishment for a bitterly divided Congress, America's Space Force will call Colorado Springs home thanks to the defense policy bill that lavishes construction cash on the Pikes Peak region and gives troops here bigger paychecks. The bill redesignates the Air Force Space Command into Colorado Springs as the Space Force, and new armed service branch responsible for America's military effort in space and defense of satellites. It helps cement Colorado Springs as a center of the military space, and said Colorado Springs Republican U.S. Representative Doug Lamborn. The bill also embarks $322 million for construction at Colorado Springs bases, including a project that Lamborn says could keep U.S. Space Command here permanently. Lamborn said while impeachment proceedings were widening some divides in Congress, they did the opposite for lawmakers hammering out the National Defense Authorization Act. Instead, Lamborn, a member of a conference committee that crafted the policy bill, said the proceedings have actually helped bring lawmakers together. The bill has all sides claiming victory from President Trump, who has eviscerated House Democrats in recent days, to House Democrats who introduced 2 articles of impeachment against the Republican president on Tuesday. The 2019 National Defense Authorization Act advances many of President Donald J. Trump's priorities, including a 3.1% pay raise for our troops, providing up to 12 weeks of paid parental leave for federal employees, ensuring survivors of deceased service members receive the benefits they deserve, and establishing the United States Space Force, fulfilling the president's promise to maintain America's leadership in space. The White House said Tuesday in a statement emailed to the Gazette. Lamborn said the biggest winner of all of them could be Colorado Springs. I think it has some tremendous victories for the national defense and for Pikes Peak's region, Lamborn said Tuesday in a phone interview from Washington, D.C. Lamborn, a member of the House Armed Services Committee, was appointed in September to the conference committee assigned to work out differences between the House and Senate on defense policy bill. Congressman delivered the biggest military construction bonanza seen in the Pikes Peak region in more than a decade. Driver Air Force Base will get $148 million for Space Operations Center to help house U.S. Space Command, he said, and that could seal the command's location in Colorado Springs, where it has been headquartered temporarily for the past several months as the Pentagon molds permanent location. Another $71 million will go to Fort Carson, where the new brigade will help advise and train foreign troops. At Peterson Air Force Base, $54 million is planned for a facility to house U.S. Northern Command Special Operations Contingent, and $49 million will go to the Air Force Academy for construction of dormitories at the preparatory school. It represents a lot of hard work, Lamborn said of the provisions. Democrats who control the House and Republicans who run the Senate came together for the measure. In the end, thorny issues included whether Congress will allocate cash for a wall along the Mexican border, were put off for battles that are sure to rage amid the 2020 election. Both sides claimed victory on other provisions, including family leave policy that will give troops and federal workers more time with newborns and newly adopted children. It says the Space Force will largely consist of troops who fall under the Air Force Space Command, including space troops at Peterson, Driver, and Buckley Air Force bases in Colorado. Air Force Space Command, and soon the Space Force, is responsible for training and equipping space troops. U.S. Space Command oversees the space efforts of all military branches and would take the lead if war reaches orbit. It probably will. And the bill has another provision that firmly plants the new service here. Nothing is subtle, or the amendments made by the subtle shall be construed to authorize or require the relocation of any facility, infrastructure, or military installation of the Air Force. The bill says in a bureaucratic language that means space things in Colorado Springs stay in Colorado Springs. If you want I'm going to read this over. Apparently my mic was off. So this article is pigeons and tiny cowboy hats are a mystery in Las Vegas. It says Las Vegas residents spotted 2 birds around town in tiny cowboy hats this week. No one seems to know how the birds got the hats, but it worries the local bird rescue group. It says Marion Hillman, a co-founder of Lofty Hopes, a pigeon rescue, told CNN it looks like the tiny birds' accessories were glued to the animals. When we saw them today, you could see some loose feathers in the glue around the hat, she said. It's definitely a concern. The rescue group put out traps to try to nab the birds dubbed Cluck Norris in the red hat and Calamity Jane in the pink lid. I think this is hilarious. The birds have become their own social media sensation, with Las Vegas residents looking out for the hatted duo. It says, I finally found one. And it says, Flores told CNN she didn't believe the birds were real until she spotted Cluck Norris in her mother's neighborhood on Monday. At first it was outside my door, and I was excited, but before I could get a video, he flew away, she said. And then when I was leaving, I saw him again and was unable to get a video. Rumor has it a 3rd bird in a brown hat is out there, but Hillman said her group hasn't been able to confirm it. If you haven't seen the videos or the pictures, let me see if I can pull this up here. They're hilarious. Let's see if I can so you can see him there wearing a cowboy hat. I think this is one of the funniest things ever. But anyways, that's all I have for tonight. Like I said, this is a live call-in. It's more or less a podcast. I upload all this to Anchor. You can go on Anchor and look under the Kingsman Report. It's on iTunes. It's on pretty much all of them. Spotify, iHeartRadio. It's on everywhere you can hear a podcast. You can hear the Kingsman Report on those podcasts. So this is pretty much me just filming a live podcast. If you want to go find any of those, go to the About section of the video. You find all links to all the social medias and all the podcasts in there. If you like the video, go ahead and like the channel and subscribe to the channel. I read, news everyone ignores that have to do with articles about all types of things happening in the world, whether it be war, riots, space, technology, and, breaking news. So I appreciate you guys watching the video. Like I said, if you like it, like and subscribe. Thank you everyone that subscribed to the channel. Thank you everyone that listens to the podcast. If you guys ever want to send any articles, you can send them to kingsmanreport2019@gmail.com, or you can call into the number that scrolls across the bottom of the screen. Hopefully, we'll get more people to listen to this that'll, be willing to call in. And the number to that's 1408-638-0968, and then you'll just enter the meeting ID number 534-233-4758, and I monitor those phone calls as well. So until I see you guys again, Yah bless and shalom.